Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of Reddit Podcast Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. Karen calls security on me for watching a video on my laptop. After that, why don't you tell someone who gives a hoot? All right then. And after that, entitled parent parks in my driveway. Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen does not get to call security on anyone. Fine with me, I'll just call the cops instead. So please smash that like button. And subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Karen calls security on me for watching a video on my laptop. I took public transport to my campus. The lecture portion is on Zoom and the lab is in person. I went to the campus library and realized I forgot my headphones. I left and found a semi-secluded picnic table outside to not disturb anyone in the library. The lecture started. A few minutes later, another girl sat down next to the adjacent picnic table with her book. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her glancing at me, and she sighed every time I spoke into the mic to ask a question. She asked if I could turn down the volume. I said sure, no problem. But then she kept complaining it's still really loud, and it's rude to play videos out loud in a public space. I explained to her that I forgot my headphones, and I left the library, and that's why I sat here first. I told her I turned it down a little bit, but I still need to listen, so it's gonna be audible. The volume was at 25% of my Mac, if that makes sense. She asked if I'm really playing the I was here first card and said to go somewhere else since these tables are the only shady spot on campus. I said no, you can move. I'm ending the conversation now. She called me inconsiderate and muttered names under her breath when she left. Apparently, she complained to the security guy on the golf cart and that I'm being rude. He came over and said, "Next time, you need to move or go to your car." I don't have a car. He shrugged and said, "You're an adult now, and this is why you need to be prepared." I had frustration tears after, since confrontation is challenging for me, and I was already stressed for my exam. This is the first time I forgot my headphones. I'm just baffled how bothered everyone was. The tables were empty when I got there. Like, she could have left if it was that bad. Plus, it's not like sitting outside on campus is quiet. It's loud. There's tons of students walking and chatting. She could have gone to the library if she wanted absolute silence. A few of my friends said I should have just moved since you're automatically the jerk if you have videos on speaker in public. Am I the jerk? Edit for clarification. I was not in the library. I was outside, far away from classrooms and the library, at a shady picnic bench. It's a secluded area. I randomly stumbled upon it while wandering around, trying to find somewhere to go sit to not bother anyone. No one else was there when I sat down. Not the jerk. I understand the sentiment that no videos on speaker in public, and I would normally agree that you would be the jerk. But you forgot your headphones, and you calmly explained to the other girl the situation. And goodness, I can't stand people without empathy. Well, what do you think? Is OP the jerk for how they handled this or not? Please let us know. Why don't you tell someone who gives a hoot? All right then. This happened back in the day with a teacher I used to work with who taught a class of adult students who took a very high-stakes exam. The high-stakes exam, unless you passed this, you couldn't qualify for scholarships, some aspects of financial aid, etc., was multiple choice, and I was part of the campus proctoring team. This particular teacher didn't like me very much, and I was fine with that. We had different personalities, and that's okay. This was an important test. This exam is an important piece of data that the county community college system uses to compare its success to sister schools across the country, and even across the state. It's not an ACT or SAT, but it's the junior college version of a GRE, basically. It just happens to be administered in this particular course, which is required by all who attend that major in pretty much anything. So anyway, during the actual test, it was my job to make sure the classroom was fully functional. Math help was covered up. This included covering up the 4 quadrants that were labeled in the 4 corners. The teacher, we'll call Captain Cheat, was okay with most of my suggested changes. Before the kids took the test, I made sure we covered up the 4 quadrants, but Captain Cheat was determined to have the 4 letters in the 4 corners up still. They were literally framed posters with fancy decorated letters, A, B, C, and D. I was like, I don't see how this could help, but sure. Anyway, the students started walking in, looking at the sparse walls, seemed panicked for a second, then relieved to see that there were still the letters up. This was my first clue of weirdness, but should have really been my second. During the test, I saw the teacher walking around the room looking at the kids' answers. I noticed a very interesting pattern that If you didn't pay attention, you would miss. No words were spoken. He would walk past a student. The student would look up at the teacher would look away into the middle distance. The student would look at the same middle distance, then bubble in an answer. It was a little weird, but a very consistent pattern. I then paid a little closer attention and saw that some students were better at hiding what the teacher was doing than others. Some kids didn't look where the teacher looked, they just knew what to bubble somehow. Then it happened. A student took their pencil, pointed at a bubbled-in letter, looked at the teacher looked at me. I looked away and saw the teacher looked intently at his picture of the corner of the room that said D. The kid then clearly changed their answer to D, even mouthing D, kind of whispering it to themselves. When testing was over and every single student handed in their Scantron and left, I immediately approached the teacher saying, "I can't believe you. Impressive, but disappointing. You're literally cheating these students out of an education. You either have them retake this test without your magic signs, or I go to the board." He responds, "Why don't you tell somebody who gives a hoot? Hashtag good luck proving it." Yes, this dude cringingly said hashtag. Enter malicious compliance. The first part of Captain Cheater's comment set me off, and at that point, honestly, I wasn't even going to go ham on this guy. This is 100% due to the additional cringe factor of saying hashtag. Now I will tell somebody who gives a hoot. The provost. The provost indeed gave a hoot. So anyway, I tell the provost, and Captain Sheet is not just brought before the board, but is put on administrative leave instantly. He wasn't sent away in handcuffs or anything, the stakes weren't that high, but this was an exam that affected a lot of people's money and in turn, lives. This guy looked particularly upset, more so than usual, and I know for a fact that he hasn't worked at the university level since, based on his LinkedIn that says he's working at a Target warehouse. Entitled parent parks in my driveway. I own a house a couple of houses down from a school, so this was bound to happen eventually. When it's time for the kids to go home, my street is lined up bumper to bumper with parents to pick up their kids. The sidewalks are full of families who walk all the way to their cars. I often have to pick up balloons, snack packaging, old homework worksheets, and general garbage that the kids drop. If you're trying to get home around this time that school lets out, there's no way you're going to be able to get there before the blockade of parents is gone. This has been a problem the few years we've lived here. There's two spaces the kids let out. My street, which is a small cul-de-sac with the school at the top, and a main road that's open all the way down to a baseball park with a wider road to allow street parking and two-way driving. Obviously, if you can't find parking, the tiny residential road isn't the way to go. There are 3 cars at my home. My car, my roommate's car, and my husband's utility van, which he parks on the road to avoid blocking our roommate since she's frequently in and out. Fridays, today, I work from home. So when I finished work, I poked my head out the window to look at my fruit tree I have near my driveway. It's spring. I keep excitedly looking for blossoms, and I notice a big white Buick SUV in the middle of my driveway, blocking both my spots for my car, which my husband was using since I was home, and my roommate's spot. Honestly, why would you park in somebody else's driveway? So on top of these entitled parents blocking up our small residential road, this person decided to take up a private residence driveway. I got on the phone with the non-emergency police line and took pictures of the vehicle and plate. Then I got my husband's keys and backed his vehicle up to block the SUV into my driveway, and I waited. 15 minutes later, the mom, bug-eye sunglasses, big old diamonds on her jewelry, and wearing athleisure as she comes around to hop in the driver's seat and smiles and waves at me sitting on my steps. Honestly, she probably thought I was the homeowner's kid or something because I'm in my early 20s rather than the homeowner. Entitled mom. Hi, I hope you don't mind. Me. You're trespassing. Why would you park in a private driveway? Sorry, won't do it again. We were just leaving. She was being really dismissive and avoiding eye contact despite taking the sunglasses off. Me. I don't care. You have no right to park in my driveway. I'm on the phone with the police. Entitled mom. It was just for a second. I was just picking up my daughter. Me. It doesn't matter. You don't live here. You don't park here. At this point, I realize the non-emergency police aren't going to pick up, so I hang up and decide to mess with her for a bit. She got in her SUV and dismissively waved at me, so I got in my vehicle that was blocking her in and waited, pretending to still be on the phone. She starts trying to back out of my driveway because there was a little gap between my utility van and my neighbor's car, but it was definitely too small for this Buick. I would like to point out this vehicle has a scuffed front bumper, so I had a feeling she has no spatial awareness outside of her backup camera. Every time she backed up, I honked, still pretending to be on the phone. She tried again, I honked again. She looked at my grass, and I was about to start recording her in case she tried to go through my front yard. I honked again. If she kept trying to back out and hit my big utility van, she would certainly lose. She gets out of her SUV and comes up to my van, recognizing she can't do anything without making it far worse for herself. Her face was visibly patchy from the distress, and she asked again, "Are you really calling the police?" "Yes, you're illegally parked on my private property. That's illegal. I don't care if it's for 5 seconds. Don't do it. You don't live here." Her kid got out of the car, and I decided that was enough. So I waited for her to get back in her SUV, and I parked my van back in its rightful spot and let her out. After that, I called the school and gave them the license plate number. Nothing will probably come of it, but I don't think she'll park in someone else's driveway again anytime soon. I'll take the jerk points because she did have her kid with her, but you shouldn't put your kid in situations like this anyways. No overtime without management approval? Great. I was in my 3rd year of an accounting job I absolutely hated, but I also hated the industry as a whole and was essentially using the position to bide my time as I learned a new skill to eventually jump to an entirely new career. My boss at the time, who I'll call Tia, was the shining example of the specific flavor of toxicity that I'd found sinking its teeth into most of the accounting departments I'd worked in. Imagine the power trip of middle management plus the prestige of managing multi-million-dollar transactions. She was the first accountant for the company when it started and had become the de facto choice for a new highest position in the department every time the company's growth called for a departmental restructuring. The only thing I could determine was earning her these positions was her confidence and conviction in the way she determined things needed to be done, which C-suite just ate right up, even paying for her to get whatever training or certification she needed to qualify for the new roles presented to her. In the meantime, she had given me 3 consecutive annual reviews, scoring a solid 0 satisfaction rate each time, which was always enough to justify a 0% raise, but never enough to justify actually letting me go and putting me out of my misery. So at this point, I was fully checked out, especially after finding out I'd become the lowest paid employee out of 100, including interns and the front desk clerk. In the latest restructuring, Tia was not promoted to the new CFO role as the board wanted real experience, but was given a controller role while a new level of management was added between us. HR had also become its own department, no longer falling under accounting's purview. Tia didn't seem to like simultaneously becoming second in accounting's command while also losing control of HR. She convinced the company to send her to law school so she could eventually transition into some kind of Frankenstein-esque accounting/legal/HR position that would oversee essentially everything the company did outside of actual production. This required her to leave the office around 2 to 3 p.m. every afternoon to attend classes, making her unreachable until the evenings. The new management position that opened up between us saw 3 to 4 employees join and leave for greener pastures over the course of a year and a half. But the story takes place while I was under the only manager I actually liked, who I'll call Kevin. I could see him doing what he could to advocate for me while still being forced by Tia to treat me the same way she had previously treated me, and I could tell it made him feel awkward handing these decisions down my way. I respected his attempts to work with us, and he actually helped us create a functional and efficient department for a few glorious but short-lived months. Story. Suddenly, a bill was passed in the US stating that salaried employees making less than $40,000 a year would be eligible for overtime pay, taking effect later in the year. After 3 years of no raises, I was sitting at around $37,500 a year, making me eligible for the eventual overtime. Working in accounting, it's pretty much expected that you'll be working 50 to 60 hours a week, especially when closing out the monthly and quarterly and annual financials. However, after everything they had put me through, I was actively giving them as close to 40 hours a week as possible, only staying behind if we had gotten an important request towards the end of the day that Kevin begged me to take care of before leaving. I knew it would look a bit off if I suddenly started working a bunch of overtime after this change took place, so I planned on very slowly ramping up my hours over the preceding months to eventually take advantage of the extra pay. After 1 to 2 months, I was regularly putting in 45 to 55 hours a week, with most extra hours spent remoting into my home computer to practice programming and looking forward to the income this new workflow would provide me. I guess they eventually caught on, as Kevin pulled me into a conference room and presented me with a contract to sign stating that I wasn't to work any overtime without Tia's approval. For reasons you'll see below, I quickly recognized this as a way to never have to work an extra hour for the rest of my tenure at the company. I signed it and immediately cut out all overtime, leaving at 4 p.m. that day as I'd worked through lunch. The next day, I stopped showing up early, started taking actual lunches, and could be heard peeling out of the lot at 5:01 every day. Kevin noticed my sudden lack of hours and tried to mention the contract not being in effect until the bill kicked in. I reminded him that we had a signed contract that failed to list a start or end date, so I considered it fully in effect. I could see the uh-oh realization hit, but he begrudgingly accepted the loss. I'll mention again that he was great, and this action had obviously come from Tia, and he was now stuck dealing with the repercussions the same as I was, so he really didn't fight me too hard on it. Later that week, an important client request came in around 4:45. He asked if I could stay behind to work on it, and I asked if he had Tia's approval. This was his second uh-oh moment, as unfortunately, due to her classes, Tia had become unreachable between 2 to 8 p.m. every weekday for the foreseeable future, and he didn't usually know he'd need extra work from me until after 4. Everything went exactly to plan, as I got to enjoy a comfortable 40-hour week, throwing the contract back at them anytime they tried to squeeze even an extra minute out of me. Now for the real kicker. Before the new bill took over, a judge blocked it and shut it down entirely, meaning no more overtime pay for salaried employees. A crippling loss for the workforce, but I at least still got to enjoy my new schedule. Management tried to claw back my hours, but hey, I still have a contract that says I can't. Sorry guys. I was finally pulled into Tia's office, who tried to explain the lack of necessity for the overtime approval now that the overtime bill wouldn't be coming into play. I again reminded her we had a signed contract with no dates and no mention of this being in relation to impending overtime law. Then came my favorite part of the conversation. So yes, this is still a valid contract, but I want to be clear that it doesn't override your original employment contract here with us. You mean the employment contract that states 40 hours a week? And that was that. I was eventually let go a few months later after replying, because I don't, when the CFO mentioned people saying I look like I don't care about my job, but I'd finally built up my skills enough to find a position in my new industry while still enjoying my severance, so I consider it a win. 4 years later, I'm doing work I enjoy from home, hanging out with my dogs with a calmer mind and a fatter wallet, all while they're still stressing over someone else's money. Tables that don't tip, maybe it's not what you think. I read a ton of stories about bad or no tips on here and thought I'd share a story that could bring a little perspective to those that are new to food service. Background. I spent almost 20 years in food service doing everything from washing dishes to service director at a country club. Mostly I waited tables, and it was actually one of my favorite jobs, mostly because of the people. One thing I learned is to not focus on what the table leaves you. If you do your job right, focusing on ensuring your customers have the best dining experience you can, then over time, you will make plenty of money. Now with that out of the way, onto my story. During college, I worked at a place called O'Malley's. It's not open anymore, so I don't have to be worried about getting anybody in trouble. And besides, this isn't that kind of story. No malicious compliance or petty revenge here, just a nice sweet story about how you can never tell about your tables. Anyway, every Sunday these 2 ladies and a girl would come in and nobody wanted to wait on them because they were super cheap and never tipped. So I volunteered and they became my regulars. I quickly learned that this was a single mom, her daughter, and her mother. They always ordered the same thing, waters with 2 ladies splitting an entree, and the girl would get something off the kids menu. And no tip. I didn't really care because Sunday lunch was always busy with the after-church crowd, and their check was so small, even a 20% tip would have been just a few bucks. Besides, they were super nice, and I understood this was their special time going out. Going out just wasn't something they could do. I did my best to treat them like everyone else, which they appreciated. This went on for over a year. Every Sunday, they would come in after church in their pretty dresses, sit in my section, order the same thing they always did, and not leave me a tip. Until one day, they did. That one day, they came in and ordered iced tea and a soda for the girl. I knew something was up. The 2 ladies each got their own entree. Nothing elaborate, but still. The girl got a full order of chicken strips. Of course, I asked what the celebration was. I mean, it was obvious this was a special occasion. The mother of the girl smiled at me. I just graduated from nursing school. We wanted to come see you one last time and say thank you for making our Sundays out so special. It meant so much to us to come in here and be treated like everybody else, even though we could never order very much or leave you a tip. We're moving to Dallas this week and we won't be coming back. I got a job at Parkland, a big hospital in Dallas, and we won't be seeing you anymore." I smiled and wished them the best of luck, letting them know I'd missed them. When I picked up their check, they had left me a $50 tip, 150% of their bill. This story took place in the early 80s, so yeah, 3 people could eat lunch for $30. Moral of the story, don't worry about one tip. You never know the customer's true story. My Karen stepdaughter wants to move back in. I'm not having it. My girlfriend, basically wife, we've been together for 11 years, comes to me and says that she wants her daughter to move back in to help her out. She's 21, has 2 kids who are 3 and 1. She's pregnant again and married. She wants to move all of them into the house so they can save to move to a better place because daughter doesn't like where they live. I'm not a kids person. This also involves me packing up my entire man cave of collectibles so they can live in it. I'm the only person working. Oh, and I hate her husband. He's a massive jerk and can't hold jobs longer than a few months while being awful with money. When I voice my concern, my girlfriend tells me all I care about is myself. Never mind, our son doesn't want them to move in either. This is the daughter that has moved out and come back 3 times since she was 16. Each time it's with a guy and more kids, and never ends well. All the guys have been losers, etc. Sometimes I feel like stuff like this will be the end of my relationship. I have a super stressful job. Having a bunch of toddlers and young parents at my home life doesn't sound relaxing. And honestly, yeah, I'm selfish. I'm 41. I thought I was done raising kids. Wow, judgmental much? So what she has a 3 and a 1-year-old at 21? Who are you to judge her lifestyle? Also, judging her partners and their lifestyle choices. You're honestly probably the reason she left home so early. I hope her family finds a better place to live than with a controlling jerk like you. You sound just like my dad, who was a straight-up narcissist. He judged me for having kids as a teen too. So to spite him, I'm now a 30-year-old woman with 8 kids and another on the way. My mom tells me how much he freaks out every time I get pregnant again, and I love it. The best part is how much it infuriates him how I don't have to work at all now, thanks to all the benefits I receive for being a single mom. The old man still works in the same factory he's been at for the last 40 years. I hope you end up just as miserable as he is. My mom wants to invite way too many people to my wedding. From the mom who got a bigger wedding ring because she was jealous of her daughter's engagement ring, I bring you the next installment of Entitled Mothering. My fiance and I have decided to have a small wedding. I say this with quotes because I am Indian and Hindu weddings are usually 300 plus people and last 4 to 5 days. My fiance is American and I am American born and raised. However, I am the first cousin to marry on my mom and dad's side, and it's becoming apparent they don't even want to be in the same building. They're divorced and can't stand each other, but that's another story, I guess. Anyways, when we first got engaged, our limit was 150 people. I was already pushing my fiance because he was dead set on 100, but I knew that was going to be impossible, so I convinced him to raise to 150. Once we told my mom that number, she about spat out her drink. "Is that a hard number?" We tried to say yes. Over the first 4 months of us being engaged, we started talking and mom was paying for the catering over our heads. "If I'm paying for the food, then why does it matter how many people I invite?" That's how it started. We fought every time we talked about it, and I told my fiance to please raise again to 175 to allow my mom to invite her people and I could have some peace. Save the dates have come in, and mom and I finally talk about the list. I already had her down for 60, names including some of her friends and distant family I hadn't seen for years. This already was more than I had wanted, but I thought she would be happy. As we go through the list, she adds a cousin and wife here, and an auntie and husband there. Final number was 125 people, guys. My fiance and I had 110 people, and I start panicking and telling her to stop adding more people. She goes on a full rant about how I'm the selfish one who wanted to have a wedding that wasn't a destination or get eloped, so I didn't have to invite all these people. What? So just because I won't invite an extra 60 family members I don't even know the names of, we didn't deserve a wedding to celebrate with our closest loved ones? The amount of times I've heard, "Can we change the venue?" Or, "Well, it's your fault for choosing too small of a venue." Instead of just respecting our wishes, she's trying to find any loophole to allow more and more people to come or just to insult me until I feel bad enough to let it slide. I also made the mistake of making my sister maid of honor because she basically just backs everything mom says and won't stand up for me at all. Well, I'm not giving her any physical copies, and that's the only way I am hopefully able to control who these get sent to. I don't know. It's been kind of a nightmare with her, and it's really putting a damper on our relationship. Just wanted to vent. I guess it's my business now. I've wanted to post this tale here for a long time. I've started to post it many times, walking away from the computer and giving up each time. Note that like many tales here, many trivial to the story details have been changed. What is important to note is that the way my industry runs is essentially via monthly service contracts with clients. There are 3 major players in this story. We have myself, Egnards, we have the old owner, let's call him Steve, and the new owner, let's call him Kyle. Act 1. Do what you love. As an aimless teenager, I started working for a small business owned by Steve. It turns out I really enjoyed what I did, so slowly over time, my life plan shifted to make sure I could continue to work for Steve for the long term. This included transferring to a local college, and because the business was predominantly run on part-time hours, making sure that any other jobs I had never conflicted with the hours I was expected to work for Steve. Steve was flawed, but overall a good boss who mostly looked out for me. I certainly think over the years he had taken advantage of me in small ways, but looking back, I really have no complaints. The thing is that while when I started working for Steve, the business name recognition was always directed towards Steve. Over the years, it eventually became, "Go to Engards, he's the best." This got to the point where I do indeed truly believe that if I did not end up working for Steve, it's very likely his business would have been nowhere near as successful as it eventually became. As years went on, it was heavily implied that when Steve retired, the business would go to me. It was never specifically stated, but Steve did have a way about skirting around those types of issues and giving me hope. Act 2. Enter Kyle. About 3 years before lockdown, Steve decided to retire and sell his business. He did indeed fulfill his promise by making a half-asserted attempt to sell it to me at an unreasonable price, but it was very clear he already had another buyer in mind, Kyle. Kyle owned another local business just outside of our market area in the same industry. Because of the way the industry worked, there really wasn't much, if any, overlap in potential customers. But Kyle had a very large amount of money and was willing to buy. What is important to note here is that, again, I do truly believe that if I didn't play ball and agree to work for Kyle, my role was so integral to operation at our business that there was no possible way a sale could go through. Over the course of negotiations, Kyle ended up buying the business and putting me in charge of running the day-to-day, something I was mostly already doing, but with a few more administrative tasks tacked onto it. The thing is, my name was still the name in town, and Kyle made zero effort to ever be on location, so nobody that did business with us ever really knew who Kyle was. Act 3. Kyle's kind of a jerk, and how I learned to stand up for myself. All was well for a while. Kyle would openly talk about me being the head honcho at my location, and mostly left me alone to deal with my clients in the professional and personable nature that I had learned from Steve. Things first came to a head a year before lockdown, when Kyle sent me to an industry conference for 4 days. I would need to take time off from my other job, which I was fine with. At the conclusion of the conference, I put in an hour's request for the hours I spent at the conference, and I was super nice about it. Actually, I should have clocked all hours at the conference each day, but instead did not account for hours for seminars that would help my boss, but were ones I had wanted to attend. The request was denied, and I was told, "Industry conferences are enriching activities. We pay for your admission, but they're on your own time." This took 2 weeks to resolve, but ended with me essentially saying, "Look, I'll still work for you because I love what I do. However, if I don't get paid, I will never go to another one of these conferences again to get new ideas for you." I was immediately paid. I will spare similar smaller stories of that nature, but that slowly started to become the relationship between Kyle and I. Act 4. Lockdown hits. When lockdown hit, our locations were shut down, and for 3 weeks we weren't able to do anything. Meanwhile, our clients were still paying for services, and because Kyle had recently moved to a new client payment portal that I hadn't been trained on yet, I wasn't able to help any clients get their money back. At one point, I messaged Kyle about going virtual and being able to still assist clients and got a very angry text back that essentially said, "Look, you're not the boss. Go forget yourself. You had your chance to be the owner and turned it down. I'm in charge." We did eventually go virtual about a week later. The big problem, of course, being that I would receive daily texts and emails and calls from clients about their memberships and bills, and there was nothing I could do to help them. It was at this point that I knew crap was hitting the fan and I needed to start doing something. So over the course of the next 2 months, I did a couple things. Spent an inordinate amount of time studying the best business structures, communicated with all the other staff at my location about my intentions, continued to give 110% to my clients in a virtual capacity, built a website and social media presence from the ground up. I don't think Kyle was expecting any of this, and he probably didn't also realize that because I often had to do back-end stuff from home, I also had what was, essentially, a little black book of every client, their email addresses and phone numbers. Act 5. Surgical Strikes. When everything was ready, I waited very patiently only the end of a service month. As I mentioned, all of our clients had monthly costs, and I didn't want to put anyone out of any part of their costs. On the last weekday of the month, I instructed the staff who would be helping clients that day to tell them to check their emails at the end of the day. At the end of the day, I sent out an email to all active and some non-active clients, as well as a texting service to text everybody. I launched our social media accounts, our website, and had even enlisted a very small amount of trusted clients to spread the word via social media once I gave them the signal. Within 15 minutes of everything, my phone was ringing off the hook. I had 50 plus emails in my inbox from different people, and my Facebook accounts were completely blowing up with local chatter. I also heard from many of these people that were calling Kyle to cancel their service. We hosted a Zoom meeting for all concerned parties and essentially decided to take the weekend to clear up any confusion with the systems and start fresh and open our doors on Monday. Within an hour of everything, Kyle sent out a text blast to every client that they would be shutting their doors effective immediately. At the start of lockdown, we had roughly 50 active clients at the business. On my first day of business, I had signed up 75 active clients, many inactive ones telling me, "Yeah, we stopped doing business with you guys because Kyle was kind of a jerk." What is really important to keep in mind here is that I never wanted to, nor cared to be a business owner. I was very happy working for somebody else as long as I wasn't treated like dirt. Had Kyle treated me even remotely better, the location would have continued to thrive and be a staple in our local community. Kyle chose to be a jerk to try and get quick money and cheat people, and Kyle lost out. We've been in business now for almost 2 years, nearly have tripled Kyle's active numbers, and continue to be a staple in our community.
Support our channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video.
Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.